Thanks so much with your words of encouragement for my debut performance last week. I'll spare you any of that rubbish this week, but it is still one of those. The 4MS Spectral Multiband Resonator, or SMR. Imagine a parametric EQ that morphs through a harmonic series based on a programmable scale or mode, with CV control of the amount that it smoothly melds or morphs between the frequencies and the speed in which the series rotates. She also looks very nice. And the 4MS Resonator for me encapsulates what's wonderful about modular synthesis. Is it a synthesizer? Is it an effects unit? Now, I'm aware that last week I jumped forward a few steps, so let's go back a few to look at the key additions to my rig. So this gem is also from a 4MS, a rotating clock divider that takes your clock or click CVs and turns them into triplet or straight divisions all the way down to 1/8 of the original. Next up, the Expert Sleeper's Disting Mark IV. Name a modular function and this thing will be able to do it in an unbelievably small box. Last week and this week I've been using it as a MIDI file player, but it can trigger samples via VCO, a VCA, you name it. And yes, I'll be buying another one soon as a consequence. Remember, it is modular, so whilst it can do lots, it can only do one thing at a time. This issue is a special Scottish edition because the company has just moved north of the border. And last but by no means least, the jewel in my rig, the Strymon Magneto. It is an absolute peach and is the crossover point between my modular system and my F-Box. I love Strymon, they make the best modern sounding guitar pedals out there, and this module is no exception. Easily the best manufactured piece of Euro crack I've laid my hands on so far. So the rig is slowly filling up. Here's me setting up before last week's performance. Finally, the first module I ever bought. Do I get a biscuit for delayed gratification? I grabbed this first because it was recently discontinued by Mutable Instruments. Their Clouds module, I've heard such good things about it. Are Mutable Instruments replacing it with something else better? Do any of you know? Anyway, I snatched one before they started getting pricey on eBay. I didn't plan this, but she also fitted flush with that row, which makes me happy. Nice. Little tip to self, don't put a module in when you've got a massively complicated patch setup. It's really awkward, especially if you've forgotten that you've run out of patch cables anyway. So I had to reset. Clock out from the sequencer into the divider, out of +4 from the clock divider and into the disting. You can see it creating CV with its lights flashing already. BPM down to something sensible, 95 BPM. Then trigger out, no hang on, that isn't right, into my maths, who will have working as an attack release module today. Then out of that into the VCA, and then the oscillator out also into the VCA to get its shaped gates from maths. Then out of the VCA into the 4MS Spectral Doodah. Then out of the 4MS into the Verb reverb to make everything stereo. So with the Disting Mark IV playing a MIDI file of the motif, I'm going to attach the 4MS Resonator. Lovely resonating bubbles. Here's me changing maths to change how quickly the 4MS rotates. You may notice that I have the 4MS Spectral Doodah actually on the bottom row, the controller row of my rig. This is because whilst it sounds nice, what I'm interested in is the real distorting peaks of certain frequencies. More of that next week. It's a short one for me this week because we've got a real treat in store.
Hi Christian, Sandy here. I was quite inspired by last week's performance, so I thought I'd have a little go myself and just do a little quick impromptu improvisation with my existing setup. And my system at the moment that I use for making live electronic music is 2 Electron boxes, the Analog 4, which is a 4-voice synthesizer, 4-voice analog synthesizer that is, and the Analog Rhythm, which is the drum machine. Both of those are connected via USB to my computer because each of them has their own sort of built-in audio interface, and they use a system called Overbridge so that I can get the individual stems for each of the voices and each of the drum groups on the rhythm. Those are routed into Ableton Live Suite 10, just sending out tempo information to both the sequencers of those boxes. The way I've got it routed is 3 of the voices on the Analog 4 are sort of pad and lead sounds which I'm performing with live, and one of them has a sequenced bass line which comes in about halfway through or so. The drum pattern that I've got on the rhythm is set up so that I have sort of a polyrhythmic thing going on. It's got a pulse to it, but some of the patterns don't loop in a kind of typical 4/4 pattern. The idea with the rhythm is that that's basically playing, once I hit play on that, the sequence is running and I'm just muting and unmuting those patterns. It should be reasonably interesting just playing that pattern over and over, since there's some sort of polyrhythmic stuff at play. And then the analog 4 is being routed through some effects processing in Ableton. Each is getting sent to 3 different return groups that I've set up, and these are using a pretty clever convolution technique along with some other stuff, which I can go into a little bit more detail about. It's inspired by Diego Stocco, who's a very interesting sound designer and composer. The idea is that you're using convolution reverb plugins, but instead of using the IR from a room, like a reverb, you're feeding it sort of field recordings or rhythmically interesting material, so that by feeding a single tone into that, you can get a kind of rolling, rhythmic, interesting sound coming out the other end. The idea with that is it's a bit like what I was talking about last week with the sort of semi-generative thing. I'm feeding some sounds into these systems. I'm not exactly sure what they're going to sound like coming back out. I'm listening to that, and that's informing how I'm playing. So I'll play the video now, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the system. The way I plan to interact the modular with this is that the analog 4 can also sequence various CV outputs, and it has an external input which can also be routed in, so I can have it quite easily fit into this system already with just a simple output module and some cables coming out in the analog 4.
Thanks so much, Sandy. Absolutely awesome. And because I'm a complete raging man of the night, I had to try just one more toy. My clouds unit. So kill the herb verb out and swap them to the clouds unit and then out of the VCA and into the cloud unit. Wow! Now look at that, the face of a man who hasn't read the effing manual. But my, it sounds great. I haven't a clue what it's doing. And wait a minute here, it has a pitch in CV hole jack thingy. Effing Nora, that sounds good. And on its own? And then with the 4MS resonator thingy? Okay, so this is generative, but is it legit if I don't have a clue what's going on? Thanks, as always, for watching. Next week, I'm going to be pretty much finishing off my rig, certainly version 1.0 of it. So do join me next week if you can. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit subscribe. If you want to be notified when this video goes up, hit the little bell button. And if you like what I do, hit like. Also, if you've got any performances that you'd like to show off, whether yourself or ones that you found online, put the links in the comments below. See you next week.